Each year, 11 million people die from what they eat. But here's the twist. Almost none die from the chemicals you fear most. Let's play a quick game. What's the real killer on your plate right now? Would you say GMOs, pesticides, that synthetic-sounding preservative you can't pronounce? Or maybe ultra-processed food, whatever that means. If you're like most people, you just got it wildly wrong. Not close, but no. And that mistake could put you in the hospital. And here's the part no one talks about. Those 11 million deaths aren't from mystery ingredients. They're from everyday foods, the ones in your fridge right now. Pause and let that sink in. Now let me ask you something else. What looks like a hazard, behaves like a hazard, might even kill like a hazard, but isn't? Any guesses? Hold on to that thought. Because while we freak out over the toxic-sounding stuff, artificial sweeteners, aspartame, monosodium glutamate, there's something else quietly multiplying in the background. It's invisible. It's alive. It doesn't care how organic your dinner was, and it can send you to the hospital from just one bite. The real twist? Your brain is wired to fear the wrong things in food, which means the danger is closer, stranger, and far more avoidable than you think. We fear what sounds chemical. We fear what feels unnatural. We fear what we can't see, but don't understand. Meanwhile, the real risks, they're hiding in your sponge, your lunchbox, your third soda of the day, and ultra-processed food, the thing we're told to avoid at all costs. What if there are moments when it's exactly what you should choose? When does walking into a fast food restaurant become the safest move you can make? This video is going to rip that illusion wide open and reveal when the junk food you fear might be the hero you need. We'll explore the psychology of food fear, why you panic over pesticides but ignore salmonella, how chemicals that sound deadly are actually tightly controlled and sometimes harmless, why moldy nuts might be more dangerous than anything made in a lab, the dirty secret about sugar, is it a food ingredient or a hidden chronic toxin? What risk really means, why exposure matters more than the name on the label, the three players in food safety, and why you might be the weakest link. And finally, we'll confront a hard truth. If the biggest risks are in our daily choices, what are we doing to stop them? This isn't about paranoia. It's about power. The power to fear less and live smarter. Let's decode the real dangers in your diet with the science behind it. And maybe change what you eat and what you fear for good. You've probably heard this word tossed around, risk. But what does it actually mean when we say something is risky to eat? At its core, risk is a balance of two forces, likelihood times severity. In other words, how likely is something to go wrong? And how bad will it be if it does? A slip on the sidewalk is likely but usually minor. A plane crash is rare but devastating. Both are risks. But we treat them differently because our brains intuitively weigh both factors. That formula is powerful, but it's just one lens. Another way scientists define risk? Let's break it down. The formula is deceptively simple. Risk equals toxicity times exposure. Sounds dry, but this one equation might change how you see every bite of food from now on. Let's decode it. A hazard is anything with the potential to cause harm. A shark is a hazard. Swimming with it? That's exposure. That's risk. But if it's in the ocean and you're on land, you're safe. Now go diving next to it, bleeding slightly, without a cage. That's exposure. That's risk. Same shark, very different outcome. Because risk isn't just about the danger, it's about how close you get. Same with food. But here's the deeper truth. We're exposed to risks every single day. Driving, flying, taking a hot shower, even breathing city air. And yet, many consumers expect food to carry zero risk. The World Health Organization is blunt about this. Complete freedom from risks is an unattainable goal. Safety and wholesomeness are related to a level of risk that society regards as reasonable in the context. In other words, all safety is negotiated. It's not about elimination. It's about acceptable thresholds. And nowhere is that more misunderstood, than with food. Think of it this way. You're more likely to die from slipping in the shower than from eating a food additive. But which one triggers panic? We accept real risks every day until the danger has a long chemical name. Now imagine this headline, or just remember when you've heard it before. This substance found in food causes cancer in high doses. Scary, right? That's the line many food alarmists use. And often, it's technically true. But here's what they won't tell you. That same chemical might also be produced naturally by your body, or naturally found in common foods, or beneficial in small doses. Take selenium. Your body needs it. It supports immunity and helps prevent cell damage. But crank the dose up too high? It becomes toxic. So, is selenium a hazard? Technically, yes. But with normal exposure, it's vital. Take cyanide. It's a known poison. But did you know it's in apple seeds? Formaldehyde? Sounds terrifying, right? It's naturally in pairs. Right now, there's some in your bloodstream, and that's fine. Why? Because the dose is tiny. The exposure is too low to matter. That's the trick. It's not just what is present, it's how much, how often, and how your body processes it. Even water can kill you in extreme amounts. So when people say, this chemical causes cancer in rats, you need to ask, how much did they give them? Because here's the behind-the-scenes truth. Toxicologists test everything at ridiculously high doses. They crank up exposure until they find the tipping point, then calculate something called NOAEL, no observed adverse effect level. From there, regulators slash that dose by 100 times or more just to be safe. So when you hear that a chemical may cause cancer, ask, at what dose? In which species? Over how long? Was it even a human? That's risk. And suddenly, it's not so black and white. That's why the legal limit for aspartame, for instance, is 15 cans of diet soda per day. And this legal limit is not even the safe limit. Every day. For life. But almost no one talks about that part. Because nuance doesn't go viral. That number isn't plucked from thin air. It comes from a meticulous process called risk assessment, the scientific engine that drives food safety worldwide. But science alone doesn't set policy. That's where risk management steps in, the job of government agencies. Their role is to translate risk into regulation, to decide how much is safe, who needs protection, and what limits keep the public out of danger. So when public concern around a substance spikes, like it did with aspartame, it doesn't get ignored. It gets reinvestigated, intensely. Not because scientists were unsure, but because risk perception matters too. When headlines create fear, authorities double-check the facts, again and again. The part no one expects. This wasn't a decision made in isolation or under the shadow of corporate lobbying. Aspartame has been re-evaluated and reaffirmed as safe by multiple of the world's most trusted food safety agencies. Aspartame sparked plenty of headlines. But what do top food safety agencies actually say? In the US, the FDA still considers it safe, even after fresh debate. In Europe, food regulators took a second look and stood by their original approval, with all member countries in agreement. Canada's health authority approved it decades ago and hasn't changed its position. And in Australia and New Zealand, same conclusion. Different agencies, different continents, same verdict. When countries around the world independently review the evidence and land on the same answer, that's more than opinion. That's consensus. This isn't one country falling for a loophole. It's a global scientific consensus shaped by independent, transparent, peer-reviewed processes. That doesn't mean aspartame is healthy. It means it's not the threat it's often made out to be. And that's a distinction worth making. So no, we're not defending every additive. But when multiple independent agencies around the world reach the same conclusion after massive scrutiny, that doesn't mean the substance is perfect. It means it's been tested harder than ever and still stood. And that's something fear-based headlines will never tell you. You walk into a lab. The animals are shaking, vomiting, some can't stand. They've just been fed a mystery ingredient, and the results are devastating. So what was it? An artificial preservative? A synthetic dye? A chemical from a pesticide? Nope. It was grapes, or onions, or chocolate. All completely normal human foods, but for dogs, they're toxic, even lethal. So what's the point? This is how risk science starts. We test on animals because we have to understand how substances behave. But just because something harms a rat or a dog doesn't mean it harms you. Different species, different enzymes, different biology. This is where bad headlines are born. This compound caused cancer in mice. Sure, but how much did they give them? Over how long? And would a human ever come close to that level of exposure? But here's what most people never see behind the headlines. Let's pull back the curtain. Toxicologists dose animals at increasing concentrations, sometimes thousands of times more than any real-world exposure, until they find the level where effects start to show up. From there, they define a critical threshold, NOAEL, no observed adverse effect level. It's the highest dose where nothing bad happens. Then they divide that number by 100 or more. That ultra-conservative number becomes your safe limit, known as the acceptable daily intake, or ADI. Why so conservative? Because people aren't lab rats, and humans vary. So scientists overcompensate to make sure you're nowhere near a danger zone. Now back to those alarmist claims. Whenever someone says, this substance in food causes cancer, but skips the dose, the duration, or the species, they're not reporting science. They're selling fear, because your body already deals with cancer-causing compounds, like formaldehyde or acrylamide, every day. It knows how to metabolize small amounts. That's why exposure matters. But here's where it gets wild. Sometimes we ignore real hazards entirely, just because they seem familiar, harmless, even natural. In the next scene, we're going to dive into one of the most misunderstood categories of all, chemicals. The ones you fear and the ones you shouldn't. Because what if the additives you obsess over are actually some of the safest things on your plate? Let's see. Let's talk about the chemicals you've been taught to panic over. Pesticides, additives, preservatives, artificial sweeteners. If it sounds synthetic or has too many syllables, the internet says, avoid it. But what if I told you these might be some of the safest things on your plate? Let's start with pesticides. Every year, government agencies test thousands of produce samples. Over 95% are within legal safety limits. And even those that exceed limits, the exposure is still often orders of magnitude below anything harmful. But here's the part no one tells you. Even when pesticide residues show up in food, in many countries over 50% of samples contain no measurable amount at all. In the EU's most recent report, 51.4% of foods tested had residues below the limit of quantification. meaning they were effectively barely detectable, and only 0.9% were found to be non-compliant. Similarly, in the US, over 96% of samples were within EPA tolerance levels, and around 42% had no detectable residue at all. Now, recall the core rule. Regulatory maximum limits aren't just 100 times lower than the dose that caused no harm in animal studies. In reality, they go far beyond that, because those limits also assume the pesticide might show up in multiple different foods, all eaten in a single day. So the margin of safety isn't just conservative, it's stacked on top of another conservative assumption. And here's the kicker. These calculations don't even account for what people actually do, like rinsing, scrubbing, or peeling fruits and vegetables, which can remove a significant portion of any residue on the surface. In other words, real-world exposure is often even lower than trace-level concentrations detectable in a lab. Put that together with actual monitoring data, and the picture becomes clear. You'd have to eat 1,190 apples in a single day, all at the maximum allowed residue level, to even approach a dose that might cause concern in a grown man, according to a pesticide risk calculator. And that's apples, one of the most pesticide-monitored crops. For most other produce, the residues measured are even lower. So yes, regulators assume the most extreme worst-case exposure, someone eating only the most contaminated foods every day for life. And then they build huge safety buffers on top of that. Yet somehow, the idea that a trace amount of chemical residue is dangerous still scares people more than microbial toxins or ultra-processed sugar bombs that we know cause real harm. That fear? It's noise. The facts? They're whisper quiet and far more powerful. So next time you hear, "This food contains pesticides," remember what that really means. In most cases, the levels are so low, they're not just below harmful. They're nowhere near any realistic threshold of concern. Even when residues exceed the legal limit, that doesn't automatically mean unsafe. It means non-compliant. Because legal limits aren't safety thresholds. They're regulatory boundaries set far below doses that could ever pose harm. Then there are additives. Take nitrites, often blamed in headlines for being cancer-causing preservatives in processed meats. Here's the twist. Most nitrites actually start as nitrates, the naturally occurring compounds found in leafy greens, beets, rhubarb, even beet juice. In fact, arugula can contain over 400 milligrams of nitrate per 100 grams. That's more than cured ham. So why do we fear one and celebrate the other? Because context changes everything. In vegetables, nitrates come bundled with antioxidants, fiber, vitamin C, and polyphenols. Your body converts them into nitric oxide, a molecule that lowers blood pressure, improves circulation, and might even boost exercise performance. Studies show diets high in plant-sourced nitrates are linked to lower cardiovascular and cancer mortality. But in processed meats, it's a different story. There's protein, heme, iron, and hardly any antioxidants. Under high heat, like frying or grilling, those same nitrates can turn into nitrosamines, which are potent carcinogens. So is it the nitrate that's dangerous? Or the matrix it lives in? Same molecule, opposite effects. It's the food environment, not just the chemical, that matters. And while we're at it, that scary-sounding preservative sodium benzoate? It's found naturally in berries, blueberries, cranberries, cinnamon. All contain it. So why the panic? Because we fear what we don't understand. We fear what sounds like science fiction. But here's what no one talks about. Nature makes some of the most dangerous compounds of all. Take aflatoxins, produced by mold growing on peanuts, corn, and grains. These are potent liver toxins and known carcinogens. Unlike aspartame, these aren't added. They just sneak in when storage conditions go bad. Yet, When was the last time someone warned you about moldy nuts? Because that's the paradox. We fear the regulated and ignore the wild. Coming up next, we're flipping the food label again, because if the most overhyped risks are actually some of the safest, what about the stuff that no one's even labeling? What if the real killer is sweet everywhere and doesn't even count as a contaminant? Up next, what doesn't look like a hazard, but may behave like one, kill like one, yet still isn't treated like one. Let's talk about that. You weren't tricked by a candy bar. You were ambushed by a yogurt, by a granola bar, by a microwave meal labeled healthy. Because the real threat wasn't sugar alone. It was its disguise. Ultra-processed food didn't just invite sugar into your life, it smuggled it in. We feared the wrong enemy. We flinched at long chemical names. We trusted what we could pronounce, what we knew, what we grew up with. Sugar, harmless, familiar, friendly. But sugar didn't come alone. It needed camouflage, a delivery system, a Trojan horse. And that's what ultra-processed food is. An industrial vehicle for sugar's mass distribution. A vehicle so effective it reached your lunchbox, your protein bar, even your baby formula. In the US, over 70% of packaged foods contain added sugars under dozens of names. Organic agave, corn syrup, maltodextrin, all sugar, all hidden. But here's the twist. Fructose, the part of sugar that causes the real damage, doesn't nourish. It doesn't trigger fullness. It goes straight to your liver. No brakes, no alarm bells, just fat accumulation. Insulin resistance, systemic inflammation. Sound familiar? It should. Because that's how alcohol behaves. Fructose is metabolized like alcohol. Same pathway, same liver overload. Fructose follows a liver metabolic route that bypasses typical insulin-regulated checkpoints, promoting de novo lipogenesis much like happens in alcohol metabolism. The difference? Alcohol comes with a warning. Fructose comes with a cartoon mascot. It doesn't buzz your brain. It bypasses it. You don't feel the damage. You just feel hungry again. Now combine that with modern food engineering. A system designed not for nourishment, but for repeat consumption, where sugar makes bland ingredients irresistible, where texture, color, and crunch are chemically optimized to override your satiety. This isn't flavor, it's feedback manipulation. And here's the biological betrayal. The earlier you're exposed to these foods, the deeper the imprint. Babies taste sugar in formula. Toddlers crave sweet snacks. By adolescence, the reward system is rewired, not by accident, by design. And the consequences? A surge in non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, type 2 diabetes in children, a global health crisis with metabolic roots. But here's what might shock you most. Some researchers propose that ultra-processed foods may engage brain reward circuits in ways resembling mild addictive behaviors. And yet, no age restriction, no warning label, just endless access. In the US, ultra-processed foods account for approximately 60 to 70% of calories and nearly 90% of added sugars consumed, making them an effective vehicle for hidden sugars. So the next time you reach for that natural, whole grain, or low-fat snack, ask yourself, is it real food or just a Trojan horse with sugar riding inside? Because ultra-processed food didn't just change your diet, it rewired your hunger, and it did it with a smile. We've been trained to scan ingredient lists like danger maps, searching for the longest word, the most exotic additive. But the deadliest threat in your kitchen doesn't come in a bottle. It doesn't hide in jargon. It hides where no label can warn you. It's invisible, and it's multiplying. We fear the chemical sounding, but chemical hazards, They're usually well controlled. Today, large food companies have entire safety and compliance teams dedicated to preventing contamination. They have the budget to test food samples, the expertise to manage chemical risks, and the incentive to protect their brand. They're inspected, regulated, and monitored. But microbial risks? They're far less predictable and far more dangerous. That's not an opinion, it's consensus. According to the World Health Organization and multiple national food safety authorities, microbiological contamination ranks as the highest priority foodborne risk, higher than pesticides, higher than food additives. These pathogens are the top cause of foodborne illness and food-related deaths globally. Cut to your kitchen. The countertop, harmless, until raw chicken lands on it. The sponge, just for cleaning, until it becomes a bacterial nightclub, warm, wet, and pulsing with life. Microbiological contamination behaves differently from chemical contamination. Chemicals don't multiply in your fridge, but microbes, they do. Left unchecked, their numbers can skyrocket in hours, especially in the danger zone between 40 degrees Fahrenheit and 140 degrees Fahrenheit. Unlike chemicals, which tend to stay constant once present, microbial hazards increase the longer food sits in warm temperatures, the more it's mishandled, and the less it's cooked or cleaned properly. That's why some foods last longer than others. It's not sorcery, it's science. Intrinsic factors like pH, water activity, preservatives, and temperature control keep pathogens at bay. Just like humans survive only within certain environments, bacteria need specific conditions. Deny those conditions? You deny their growth. That's why pasteurized milk stays safe. Why vacuum-sealed low-water foods don't spoil. Why acidic items like vinegar are microbiological minefields for bacteria. But the moment food enters your home, the safety net shrinks. The factory had pasteurization. You have a microwave. The production line had sterile zones. You have a dish towel from last week. Everyday actions, rinsing meat, reusing towels, storing leftovers the wrong way, can unleash a microbial roulette. And in this game, one spin can change everything. Because unlike chemical exposures that might take years to cause harm, microbes don't wait. One bite, one slip, one day. That's all it takes for pathogens like Salmonella, Listeria, or E. coli to move in. And this isn't theoretical. In 2011, a deadly E. coli outbreak in Europe linked to contaminated sprouts caused over 50 deaths and nearly 4,000 illnesses. In the US, cantaloupe tainted with Listeria in 2011 killed 33 people. These weren't obscure incidents. They were national headlines and reminders that the real dangers aren't in the ingredient list, but in invisible life forms that multiply when we let our guard down. Microbiological outbreaks aren't rare. They're constantly reported, especially in countries like the US, where strong surveillance systems and traceability make it possible to detect, track, and investigate contamination events led by CDC. The numbers are not abstract. In the US alone, foodborne illnesses sicken an estimated 48 million people a year. Over 3,000 die. One contaminated batch, one mishandled burger, one forgotten fridge item. That's all it takes. We've made food safer than ever. Regulations, inspections, technology. But once it enters your home, the burden shifts from supply chain to your sponge, from factory floors to fridge doors. You're halfway across the world, jet-lagged, hungry, and standing in front of a hotel buffet that looks incredible. Fresh-cut mango, vibrant salad, grilled fish with a golden crust. Next to it, a sealed tuna sandwich in plastic wrap, and a can of soda, sweating in the heat. Your instincts scream, go natural, eat healthy. But what if that mango was rinsed in contaminated water? What if the lettuce sat in a sink where chicken was washed an hour earlier? What if that fish, never fully cooked, and crawling with pathogens your body's never faced? Then there's the street food. You want to try it. Of course you do. That sizzling skewer, that tropical smoothie. It feels like culture on a stick. But what you don't see? The unwashed hands, the reused oil, the ice made from untreated tap water. Because that's exactly what happened in Ghana. Conference attendees, locals, and international guests sickened within hours. Vomiting, diarrhea, not from junk food, from buffet food, from a hotel that looked clean. And in India's mountain town of Shimla, a postcard-perfect getaway turned into a hepatitis E outbreak. Over 1,600 infected, dozens dead, all traced back to untreated municipal water used in food prep, in ice, in healthy meals. Here's the twist no one expects. In some places, ultra-processed food might be your safest choice. Not because it's nourishing, but because it's controlled. Cooked to protocol, sealed tight, shipped in sterile conditions. Fast food chains? Say what you will, they follow rules, standardized procedures, industrial-level hygiene. It won't heal you, but it probably won't hospitalize you either. That's not a diet plan. That's survival strategy, because skipping greens for a week won't kill you. But one bite of tomato, rinsed in poorly treated water, might end your trip and change your life. So no, this isn't a love letter to junk food. It's a warning about misplaced trust. In places where you don't know the water, sometimes the safest thing you can eat is the thing you'd never touch at home. And the next scene, it asks the question no one wants to answer. When something does go wrong, who's really watching the food? You've heard the warnings. This additive causes cancer in high concentrations. Banned overseas, but still on your shelf. It's enough to make anyone paranoid or numb. But now, you know better. You've seen the system, the science, the stakes. You know the difference between risk perception and actual danger, between a viral headline and what the evidence actually shows. And more importantly, you know this. Yes, chemical hazards exist. But in most developed countries, the ones that make the loudest noise, they're often the ones most tightly controlled. Yes, some ingredients sound frightening, but their danger lies in the dose, not the name. And yes, food isn't risk-free. But the fastest way to real harm? It's not aspartame. It's E. coli on your lettuce. It's listeria in your fridge. It's chicken juice on your cutting board, and a salad right after. Microbes kill fast. Ultra-processed foods kill slow. But both can be deadly. And now you know where the real threats live. So who's watching the food? Agencies are. Scientists are. But from this moment forward, so are you. Because once you understand risk, you stop fearing the label and start managing the reality. So here's what it all comes down to. The food risk pyramid. At the bottom, the dangers that rarely make headlines, but cause the most harm. Ultra-processed diets, excess sugar, nutritional imbalances. They silently drive obesity, diabetes, heart disease, and shape global health outcomes more than any label ever will. In the middle, the fast-acting threats, microbiological contaminants, bacteria like Salmonella, Listeria, E. coli, invisible, fast-moving, and often underestimated. These aren't long-term risks. They're one-meal-away risks. And at the very tip, the things we're told to fear the most: pesticide residues, preservatives, food additives, GMOs, often demonized, yet tightly regulated, rigorously tested, and found at levels far below anything harmful. We've been terrified of the tip, while ignoring the base that's collapsing beneath us. So what will you change now? Not everything, not all at once, but maybe. You start with one less ultra-processed meal a week, one safer way to store leftovers, one habit that protects your health, instead of gambling with it. Because when you understand food risk, you don't just change what's on your plate. You change your power over it. And that might just be the most important ingredient of all.